To bring a successful negligence claim in civil court, a plaintiff must prove 4 interconnected elements: duty, breach, causation, and actual injury. If the plaintiff fails to satisfy any single one of these requirements, the entire legal claim collapses. Consider a common scenario. A driver briefly checks their phone and taps the bumper of the car in front of them at a red light. The driver clearly breached their duty of care. In the 2006 case Wright v. Breen, a jury examined this exact situation. They found the defendant negligent for causing a minor rear-end collision, but they awarded 0 damages because the plaintiff could not prove any resulting bodily harm. Unlike intentional torts, negligence law does not recognize a technical legal injury. A technical legal injury is a violation of a legal right that does not result in measurable, real-world harm. Without physical or financial damage, you cannot collect nominal damages. Establishing that a duty existed, that a defendant breached it, and that a plaintiff suffered actual harm is generally straightforward. The mechanical breakdowns in tort law occur when courts attempt to measure the third requirement, causation. The strict baseline for measuring actual cause is the but-for test. The but-for test is a standard that asks whether the plaintiff's injury would have occurred but for the defendant's specific conduct. We can observe this strict logic in Hale v. Ostrow. A pedestrian was walking down a municipal sidewalk. She encountered overgrown bushes protruding from the defendant's property. This physical obstruction forced her to leave the sidewalk and detour into the street. While navigating this forced detour, she tripped on a crumbled section of pavement and sustained an injury. The property owners argued they owed no duty because she fell on an adjacent property. The court rejected this, reasoning that the trip simply would not have materialized but for the need to bypass the overgrown bushes. As long as physical events form an unbroken, one-to-one sequential chain, the but-for test perfectly assigns legal liability to the party that set the events in motion. This linear logic gate fails when subjected to scenarios involving multiple independent forces. The textbook anomaly involves redundant causes. 2 independent fires, Fire A and Fire B, start separately, merge concurrently, and destroy a single home. If we erase Fire A, the house still burns down exactly the same way due to Fire B. Applying the identical test to Fire B yields the same result. Under strict linear rules, neither fire is the but-for cause, effectively immunizing both guilty parties from paying for the damage. To bypass this mathematical loophole, courts use the substantial factor test. The substantial factor test is a legal standard that assigns liability if a defendant's actions materially contributed to the plaintiff's injury, even if other redundant causes exist. When strict logic yields an absurd result that shields culpable wrongdoers, the judiciary will proactively alter the rules to ensure those who materially contribute to the harm pay for it. A second, more complex dilemma arises when it is certain that only one negligent party caused the harm, but it is physically impossible to identify which one. This exact gridlock occurred in the 1948 landmark case Summers v. Tice, involving 3 men on a quail hunting trip. Both defendants carelessly fired their identical 12-gauge shotguns directly toward the plaintiff at the exact same moment in time. The plaintiff was struck in the eye by a single birdshot pellet, resulting in major, permanent damage. Because the shotgun shells were identical, the plaintiff could not scientifically prove which specific defendant's gun fired the blinding pellet. Under the traditional rules of negligence, the plaintiff's case is dead. They cannot prove that either specific defendant was 51% responsible for the injury. The California Supreme Court solved this by engineering the doctrine of alternative liability. Alternative liability is a legal rule where the burden of proof shifts to multiple negligent defendants to prove they did not cause the injury. Because both shooters acted without ordinary prudence, the court shifted the burden. The defendants were forced to carry the weight of absolving themselves. If the defendants cannot prove their innocence, they are held jointly and severally liable. Joint and several liability means the plaintiff can collect the entire damage award from any one of the liable defendants. Courts prioritize compensating innocent victims over evidentiary perfection. If wrongdoers create a scenario where physical identification is impossible, the law forces them to share the financial ruin. This evidentiary impossibility compounds when scaled from 2 simultaneous hunters to hundreds of pharmaceutical corporations. In Sindel v. Abbott Laboratories, pregnant women took a drug called DES to prevent miscarriages. DES was a fungible product. A fungible product consists of interchangeable goods that are chemically identical and generic in nature, regardless of who manufactured them. The crisis was defined by a long latency period. The plaintiff developed reproductive cancer decades after her mother ingested the drug. The passage of time and the identical nature of the generic pills destroyed any ability to identify the specific manufacturer that produced the exact dose the mother consumed. To regulate an entire industry, the California Supreme Court expanded the Summers Doctrine into market share liability. Market share liability holds each manufacturer financially responsible in proportion to their share of the product's total market. Under the mechanical rule of Sindel, if a plaintiff sues enough companies to represent a substantial share of the market, the burden of proof shifts directly to those corporations. Financial damages are strictly engineered. A defendant pays a percentage of the plaintiff's damages exactly equal to their percentage of the drug's market share at the time. This doctrine has strict limits. Courts refuse to apply market share liability to non-uniform products like vaccines because the risks vary by manufacturer. Market share liability replaces individual blame with an equitable distribution of overall social risk, representing tort law's furthest departure from physical causation. Returning to the foundational architecture of a negligence claim, we see the rigid pillars of duty, breach, causation, and actual injury. But modern causation is no longer a single rigid requirement. It operates as a sprawling spectrum of legal tests, beginning at strict physical but-for causation. When redundant causes or simultaneous negligence obscure the facts, the law slides to the middle, employing shifted burdens and alternative liability. At the far extreme, where physical proof is entirely abandoned, liability relies purely on statistical models and market share. Tort law does not function as an exercise in perfect physics. It operates as a pragmatic system of public policy and deterrence. When rigid rules shield wrongdoers, the legal system continually engineers new frameworks to ensure the burden of uncertainty falls on the culpable, not the innocent.